Imagine this. You're sitting alone in a room, phone screen glowing in your hand. Someone just messaged you again. Not because they care, because they're used to you answering. Fast. Always. Without question, without hesitation. And there it is. That twitch in your chest. That old reflex. I should reply. But something in you hesitates this time. Something deeper says, no, not this time. And in that split second of silence, everything begins to change. But not the way you expected. Suddenly they're annoyed, confused, asking, what's wrong with you? They're not worried about you. They're worried about their access to you. You didn't yell, you didn't fight, you just became unavailable, and the whole game shifted. Why does your absence cause more panic than your presence ever did? Why does silence feel like betrayal to people who never truly saw you? Why do you feel guilty for choosing yourself? Here's the truth. No one wants to say out loud. Most of your relationships aren't built on love. They're built on convenience, on utility, on how easy you are to reach, how fast you respond, how much of yourself you give without asking for anything back. And the second you stop being easy, you become a problem. You become different. You become distant. Not because you changed, but because you stopped playing the role they cast you in. You were the fixer, the responder, the one who always showed up. And now you're starting to ask yourself something dangerous. What if I stopped being that person? But that's where it gets hard, because the moment you stop being available, the silence creeps in. And that silence doesn't just expose others, it exposes you. It forces you to face a question you've been running from your whole life. Who am I when I'm not needed by anyone else? Not wanted, not useful, not fixing, just me, alone, unreachable. Do I even know that person? Or have I buried them beneath years of saying yes when I meant no? Of showing up when I wanted to disappear? Of being everything to everyone except myself? What if your constant availability isn't a virtue? What if it's the very thing that's keeping you small, tired, resentful, lost? Think about it. Who drains you the most? The people who respect your space, or the ones who expect you to be on call for their crisis, but vanish when you're the one breaking? And here's the gut punch. You taught them how to treat you. You trained them to expect you to be the one who bends. Every time you answered right away. Every time you said, it's fine, when it wasn't. Every time you kept the peace by sacrificing your own. Carl Jung once said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But here's the flip side no one talks about. Everything you tolerate from others reveals how little you understand your own worth. So now I'll ask you the question that changes everything. What if you stopped being so available, not out of anger, not out of pride, but out of power, out of truth, out of finally choosing yourself? Would the people around you adapt or disappear? Would they love you or the version of you they could control? What would rise in the silence if you stopped filling it for everyone else? And more importantly, what's the cost of staying reachable to a world that never truly sees you? We're going deeper next, and it's going to get uncomfortable, because this isn't about cutting people off. It's about waking up to how you've been cut off from yourself. You've been sold a lie, that your worth depends on how accessible you are. And it's time to expose where that lie came from. Because once you see it, really see it, you'll never play the same game again. So how did we get here? How did you become the person who answers instantly, apologizes for being tired, and feels guilty for needing space? Why is it that pulling away, even when it's the right thing for your soul, feels like betrayal? Here's the truth you were never told. You were conditioned to be available, since childhood, since the first time you were praised for being so helpful, so nice, so responsible. You learned that love was earned, not given. That peace depended on how quickly you smoothed things over, fixed the tension, said yes before someone got upset. It didn't matter how you felt. It mattered how they felt about you. And that's where the root took hold. You became addicted to being needed, because needed felt safer than being ignored. Carl Jung called it the persona, the mask we wear to survive the social world. It's not fake, it's functional, but it's not you, not the whole of you. You crafted your persona around being dependable, likable, low maintenance. You learned how to shrink your needs and inflate your usefulness. That was your survival strategy. But here's the cost. Every time you put that mask on, you split from your real self. Your energy stopped flowing inward and started pouring outward into the roles you thought you had to play. The good one, the strong one, the available one. Now fast forward to adulthood. You think you're making choices, but most of your emotional decisions are still being made by that same child. The one who learned to please first, ask later, and disappear if it made things easier for everyone else. That child never learned boundaries, because boundaries were punished or ignored. So now, when you try to say no, your body flinches like it's in danger, because somewhere deep down, part of you believes that saying no means losing love. And that belief, it's been silently running your life. Nietzsche once said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how. But if you don't know your why, you'll let everyone else decide it for you. Your boss, your partner, your family. All of them will pull at your time, your energy, your attention, and you'll give it, because no one ever taught you that you're allowed to keep some of it for yourself." This goes deeper than people-pleasing. This is soul amnesia. You forgot who you are without the feedback loop, without the constant approval, the validation, the little gold stars that say, good, you're still wanted, you're still needed. But here's the philosophical trap. If your identity is based on how useful you are to others, you'll never know who you are when no one needs you. That's why stillness feels terrifying. That's why silence feels like failure. Because it's just you, raw, unmasked, without a script to follow. And in that silence, your mind starts screaming, "Am I worth anything? If no one is asking for me, let's go deeper." Carl Jung believed the psyche is not designed for constant outward engagement. He said that wholeness comes through individuation, the process of integrating the unconscious parts of ourselves into a unified self. But individuation requires withdrawal, not isolation out of fear, withdrawal out of strength. You can't become whole if your identity is scattered across everyone else's expectations. You can't access your deeper self if you're always on, always reacting, always giving. In fact, the very energy that could be used to understand and transform your inner world, you've been giving it away in texts, favors, long phone calls, fake smiles, and forced conversations. Every yes that came from guilt, every "I'm fine" that buried your truth. That's your life force, bleeding out. And here's where the system reinforces it. We live in a culture that rewards burnout, that celebrates overexposure, that worships those who are always reachable, always hustling, always on call. Your job expects instant replies. Your friends expect endless emotional labor. Social media trains you to respond fast or disappear completely. This isn't just emotional exhaustion, it's existential disconnection. Because when you are constantly accessible to others, you become inaccessible to yourself. But no one tells you that. Instead, you're told to keep smiling, keep giving, keep posting, don't disappoint anyone, don't rock the boat. So you shrink, you stay small, and you learn to survive by becoming the version of yourself that other people like best, even if it's slowly killing you inside. That's the real problem. Not that people take too much, but that you were never taught how to keep enough. And now here you are, tired, resentful, pulled in 1,000 directions, and still wondering why no one really sees you. Maybe it's because you've never stopped long enough to see yourself. But what happens when you finally do? What happens when you stop responding automatically? When you let the phone ring, the message go unanswered, the favor go unmet? What happens when you reclaim that energy and keep it for yourself? That's what we're about to find out. Because the cost of staying available isn't just time, it's identity. And once you realize that, you'll start to see how deeply the consequences run. In the next section, we'll expose those consequences, not just in your schedule or your body, but in your mind, your relationships, your sense of worth. Because this trap doesn't just drain you, it rewires you. You think being constantly available is harmless. You think it just makes you a good friend, a reliable partner, a team player. But the truth is darker than that, because this isn't just a habit, it's a system of self-erasure, a quiet dismantling of your identity, one yes at a time. One no problem when it was a problem. One fake smile that kept the peace but killed your clarity. This isn't about being nice, it's about being used. And not just by people, but by the emotional patterns you never questioned. Let's break it down. Every time you respond out of obligation instead of choice, your nervous system gets the message. Your needs don't matter. Your peace can wait. Your worth is negotiable. Over time, this rewires your brain. Your baseline becomes anxiety. You lose the ability to differentiate between real connection and guilt-fueled loyalty. And here's what's worse. You start anticipating other people's reactions before you even speak. You filter your truth through the lens of, will this upset them? Will they leave? Will I be seen as selfish? So you edit yourself, you soften, you shrink, you perform, and then you wonder why you feel invisible. Carl Jung talked about the shadow, the part of you that holds everything you deny, suppress, or disown. Most people think the shadow is just anger or shame. But there's another piece in there too, your unmet needs, your honest no, your right to be left alone. You don't express those things, you repress them. And what you repress festers. Think about it. How many times have you smiled while your gut screamed leave? How many times have you replied when your whole body said not now? How many hours have you lost replaying a conversation, analyzing every word because you couldn't just let it go? That's not just overthinking. That's your soul trying to claw its way back to the surface. You want the proof? Look around. Look at your body. Tight chest. Tension in your jaw. Trouble sleeping. Chronic fatigue. That's not stress. That's self-abandonment with a smile. Look at your relationships. Unbalanced. Draining. Confusing. You're the one people go to for advice, for emotional support, for comfort. But when you need something, suddenly everyone's busy. Look at your mind, always spinning, always tracking, always tuned into everyone else's moods, like an emotional radar. And you wonder why you feel exhausted. It's not just that you give too much, it's that you give automatically, and that has consequences. Here's what no one tells you. Being constantly available teaches people to treat you like a resource, not a person. You stop being seen. You start being used. Not always maliciously, but predictably. You become the emotional vending machine. Push a button, get validation. Push again, get support. No need to ask how you're doing. No need to refill the machine. Just take and take and take. And you? You confuse being needed with being valued, but they're not the same thing. Neuroscience backs this up. The brain thrives on patterns. When you react the same way over and over, when you always say yes, always answer, always appease, you carve neural pathways that make it automatic. So even when you want to pause, to choose differently, your brain panics because it's unfamiliar. It feels like danger. So you cave, not because you're weak, but because your nervous system has been trained to fear stillness. But here's what's terrifying. The longer you live this way, the harder it gets to remember who you were before the world trained you to be on call. And it doesn't stop there. Overavailability isn't just internal. It teaches others how to treat you. But it also attracts a certain kind of person, the opportunist, the energy vampire, the one who feeds off your guilt and your inability to say no. They don't need to manipulate you with threats or demands. They just need to lean on your conditioning, push the right guilt button. Trigger that old need to please, and you fold. You become predictable. And what is predictable? Controllable. That's the quiet tragedy. Most of your emotional suffering isn't caused by others. It's caused by you staying accessible to people who never earned your access. And the worst part? You start doing it to yourself. You self-monitor. You silence your own voice before anyone else has to. You check your tone. You cushion your truth. You keep explaining yourself. And all the while, you tell yourself, I'm just being nice. But it's not niceness. It's a trauma reflex. So now here you are, still saying yes, still showing up, still wondering why it feels like no one's ever really there for you. Because the truth is, most of them are there for the version of you that never says no. And when that version starts to fade, so will they. But maybe that's the gift in all this. Because when you stop being constantly available, the people who vanish reveal who they always were. And the emptiness that shows up in their absence, that's not loneliness, that's space. Space for the real you to come back. And that's where the rebellion starts. Not with a scream, but with a whisper. With the first no you don't apologize for. With the silence you don't feel guilty about. With the message you leave on read because you choose peace over performance. And that's what we're going to talk about next. Because once you see the trap, the only thing left is to break it. This is where it starts. The rebellion. Not the loud kind, not fists in the air, not slamming doors. This rebellion is subtle, clean, quiet, almost invisible. And that's what makes it powerful. It starts the moment you decide you don't owe everyone an explanation, the moment you choose not to reply, not to prove, not to defend, not to please, the moment you choose you. You want to know how to break the pattern? Stop reacting. That's it. It sounds simple, but it will feel like withdrawal. Because for years you've been reacting to everything, a text, a tone, a side comment, a silence. You've been trained to perform, to fix, to respond on cue, but now you pause, you breathe, You choose when, how, and if you want to engage. And in that pause, you take back something that was stolen from you a long time ago, your inner authority. This isn't detachment, this is discernment. It's not I don't care, it's I care too much to waste my energy on what doesn't serve me anymore. It's the rebellion of stillness in a world that wants you constantly spinning. Because here's the paradox. The more you stop trying to explain yourself, the more people start listening. The less you say, the more weight your words carry. The less you show up out of guilt, the more power your presence holds. This is what Carl Jung meant when he said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." You thought being needed was fate. You thought being the strong one was your role. You thought being available made you lovable. It didn't. It made you replaceable. So now you rebel, but not by burning bridges, by building boundaries, not by yelling no in anger, by saying it calmly, unapologetically, and meaning it. The rebellion starts when you stop waiting for permission to rest, to step back, to say, not today. Here's something no one tells you. Every time you say no and survive, you rewrite the script. You prove to your nervous system that silence isn't punishment, that space isn't abandonment, that protecting your peace doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you a free one. And it's not just psychological, it's historical. Think of the great minds, the real revolutionaries. They all stepped back before they stepped forward. Nietzsche went into solitude before writing his sharpest truths. Jung isolated himself to explore the unconscious and sketch his inner world. Thoreau walked into the woods to remember who he was without the noise. They weren't running away, they were breaking free. You don't find clarity by staying in the chaos. You find it when you stop dancing to music that doesn't match your rhythm anymore. Here's what breaking free looks like in real life. You stop replying out of guilt. You let the phone ring. You don't go to the party you didn't want to attend. You sit in your room and instead of scrolling or numbing, you listen to your breath, your body, your thoughts. And at first it will feel like a withdrawal, because it is. You're detoxing from being everyone's emotional supplier. But after the shakes stop, comes clarity. After the guilt comes peace. You will lose people. That's a fact. The ones who only valued your yes will disappear when they meet your no. The ones who needed your chaos to distract from their own will call you distant. The ones who fed off your availability will panic when the door closes. Let them go. Let the door stay closed. Because for every one person who leaves when you stop being available, you make room for something real to enter. Respect, peace, truth. You'll feel tempted to go back, to explain, to clarify, to rescue the version of you they liked better, but don't. You're not that person anymore. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But here's the truth. No one tells you becoming who you are means giving up who you were trained to be. The helper, the fixer, the buffer. That was a role. This is your life, and your life deserves a main character who knows how to sit in their own power without having to perform for anyone else." So this is the rebellion. You stop over-explaining. You stop rushing to reply. You stop showing up where you're not seen. You reclaim your energy like your life depends on it, because it does. You say, no more. And then you say, now it's my turn. Because real peace isn't found in being everything to everyone. It's found in being fully yourself, even if that self is quiet, distant, unavailable. The ones who get it will find you in the silence. The rest were never meant to follow you into your freedom. In the next section, we'll uncover the ultimate truth, the part that leaves no room for going back, the core insight that changes how you see yourself, your relationships, and your role in this world, forever. Because once you understand why your silence is power, you'll never waste your voice again. Here it is, the part most people never reach, the part where everything quiets down and the truth finally shows its face. Not the comforting kind, the kind that guts you before it frees you. You've pulled away, you've sat in the silence, you've stopped reacting, and now you're here wondering, what was all of this really about? Here's the ultimate truth. You were never exhausted because you did too much. You were exhausted because you were never allowed to just be. That's it. That's the root. You were conditioned to believe that your worth came from action, from usefulness, from your ability to be needed. So you built your identity around being available, emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, like a light switch for other people's darkness. And now as you sit in the stillness you fought so hard to avoid, something becomes painfully clear. They never loved you. They loved what you did for them. They loved who you were for them. But the real you, the quiet you, the unavailable boundary setting, no longer apologizing you, that version terrifies them, because that version can't be controlled. And that's the shift Jung was pointing to all along. He said, we do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This is your darkness. The darkness of realizing that your availability was a mask, that your kindness was a transaction, that your people-pleasing was a shield to avoid rejection. And now that you've dropped the act, you see what was really underneath it all. Fear. Fear of abandonment. Fear of being alone. Fear that if you stop giving, you'll stop mattering. But here's what no one tells you, what no one wants you to know. You can be alone and still be whole. You can be silent and still be powerful. You can stop being available and become unforgettable. Because the truth is, when you withdraw from what drains you, you reconnect to what defines you. And in that silence, something ancient returns. Self-respect, self-trust, sovereignty. Yes, it's going to cost you. You'll lose connections that were never real. You'll be called cold by people who only knew you warm and obedient. You'll feel the sting of being misunderstood, mischaracterized, maybe even hated. But the price of being misunderstood is cheap compared to the price of self-abandonment. You've already paid that one for years. In anxiety, in resentment, in silence, swallowed like poison. So what do you gain? Everything. You gain time. Time that used to be eaten by people who never filled you. You gain energy. Energy that used to leak out in texts, calls, favors, and fake smiles. You gain clarity. The kind that doesn't come from thinking. It comes from choosing yourself over and over until it becomes instinct. You gain space, not empty space, sacred space. The space where your soul gets to breathe again. And in that space, something begins to grow. Not your ego, not your performance, but your presence, real presence, the kind that doesn't chase, the kind that doesn't perform, the kind that doesn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. And here's the final paradox, the most liberating one of all. When you stop being available to everyone, you finally become visible to yourself. Not as someone's solution, not as someone's lifeline, but as your own center. That's who you've been looking for all along. Not the version of you that gets applause, the version that feels like home. So what now? Now you protect it. You become ruthlessly selective with your energy. You stop justifying your peace. You leave messages unanswered, not out of spite, but out of alignment. You say, I don't explain myself anymore. Because the people who truly love you won't need explanations. They'll recognize your silence for what it is, not distance, but healing. Not arrogance, but truth. Not abandonment, but return. Return to yourself. This is the final door, the place most people turn back from. Because this is where you stand alone, not because you're unloved, but because you're no longer available for conditional love. And it's in this aloneness that the real work begins, not to rebuild who you were, but to reclaim who you've always been beneath the noise. So if you've made it this far, you already know. You don't need permission anymore. You don't need to be chosen to feel worthy. You don't need to keep betraying yourself just to keep others comfortable. You are not here to be everyone's emergency contact. You are here to live. Fully, honestly, freely. And that begins the second you stop being available.